Hello and welcome everyone to the second evening of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire's Global in the Granite State, Global Forum Fundraiser. We're so happy to have you join us for this important discussion and for your continued support of our work. My name is Tim Horgan and I'm the Executive Director of the Council. Tonight, we are honored to host former U.S. Secretary of Defense under President Obama and former Republican Senator from Nebraska, Chuck Hagel. However, before we get to that, I have a few reminders for everyone. First, we will be taking your questions throughout the evening in a variety of ways. You can share them with us through our council email or on our social media channels, which are noted here. Also, you will see that little blue chat function in the bottom right of your screen where you can ask your questions too. We hope to have a robust discussion after the Secretary's remarks, so please send in your questions early and often. In addition, I must mention that the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire is a nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization. Therefore, as with all of our programs, the ideas expressed here tonight do not necessarily reflect those of the organization, its board, staff, members, sponsors, or supporters. Speaking of sponsors, I would like to take a moment to thank those who have helped make this program successful. A big thank you to our patron sponsors who are listed here for your continued support. We are so glad that you continue to find value in our efforts to build this global community. Also, I would like to thank our corporate sponsors, CCA Global, Partners, and McLean Middleton. Your generous sponsorships and leadership in our communities are a testament to the great work that you do. I would also like to thank our mission partner, Southern New Hampshire University, for all you do to help the Council in our mission. At this point, I would like to bring up Rachel Hampy, World Affairs Council of New Hampshire board member, to provide a brief welcome.
Good evening. As Tim mentioned, I am Rachel Hampy and I am a longtime board member of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire. I am also an attorney in the litigation department of McLean Middleton Law Firm, which has 5 locations in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. We have over 100 attorneys and we recently celebrated our 100th anniversary. Our colleagues have a long-standing tradition of civic and community involvement, and we are proud supporters of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire. We are especially delighted to be sponsoring tonight's very timely discussion on the future of America's global leadership, as we are just weeks away from the new administration taking office on January 20th, and as we watch that new administration announce cabinet nominations and coming policy changes. We thank the Council for its commitment to bringing to New Hampshire distinguished speakers like Secretary Chuck Hagel, and we thank Secretary Chuck Hagel for his service and for sharing his insights with us this evening. Thank you, and with that, I hand it back to Tim.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Tonight, we have another special guest to actually introduce our speaker, a longtime friend of the Secretary's, Senator Bob Odell. Senator Odell served in the New Hampshire House for 1 term before becoming a 6th-term senator here in the state. Senator, welcome to the stage.
Well, thank you very much, Tim, and it's a great honor to welcome Chuck Hagel to New Hampshire. We've done it before, and we're happy to have him back again. In the past, when things were different, we would pick him up at the airport. We'd make some stops along the way to shake some hands and remind old friends of, remind friends that we're out helping the candidate, in that case, often Bob Odell, or to make new friends for Senator Hagel. This is obviously a very different time, but we still want to make sure that the senator feels welcome, and we appreciate him being supportive of the World Affairs Council here in New Hampshire. I did some math, Chuck, and I think it's over 40 years that we've been friends. So I've seen you through one heck of a lot of different places, and I know many of the people that are participating tonight know much of your history, but I'd like to remind them of some things they may not be quite aware of. And that would be your service in Vietnam, where you were a brave soldier and were awarded 2 Purple Hearts. You were a congressional aide, and I mention that only because when you were working for John Y. McAllister from Nebraska, you maximized that opportunity and made so many lifelong friends from your service on the Hill and meeting and working with so many of those people. And we've seen them come back into your life over and over again. You also were an entrepreneur and a pioneer in cell phone development. I remember having you explaining to me, you did the explaining, I didn't do much understanding, that at some point these cell phones would be all over the world. And we would be constantly being called 24 hours a day. And there would be countries that would leap from no telephones to cell phones and never have wires. And this was all quite intriguing with me. I am thankful to this day that you said, would you like to invest? And we did a little bit, and I think it's now part of AT&T. So thank you. The other part that I always am reminded of is after that success, you still were willing to come back for not-for-profit that was close to your heart, and that was the USO. USO had moved from New York to Washington. It was on its own in terms of fundraising, and it was near failure. And you came in a couple of years, turned that organization around, made it robust and made it financially secure. I actually do not believe there was another person in the United States at that moment, at that time, that could do it. And I saw your leadership, and I saw what a soldier can do standing up to generals. And I think some days, once in a while, the perspective for the average guy is really important. So I'm still thankful for all that you did there. And then, of course, was that Senate race that was mentioned a little earlier. It was a primary against an incumbent statewide office holder in Nebraska, and not many people thought you could win. And then there was after the primary, there was the general election against the incumbent governor, and many people didn't think you would win, and you did. And you served 12 years honorably in the United States Senate. And then after retirement, you became, as Rachel mentioned, the 24th Secretary of Defense. Along the way, you've been a professor at Georgetown, you've been an investment banker, you've been head of the Atlantic Council, a corporate board member, over and over again, always active, always with energy, always with dedication, and always with integrity. And I also want to mention that tonight, this meeting was originally scheduled for May, and it may be well fortuitous that it is in this month, as Rachel pointed out, less than 2 months before a new president comes to office. This new president is a man you know, personal friend, family friend, and political ally at different times in your career. And so it's pretty fortuitous that you're here tonight to talk about America's future global leadership and to give us the insight and the perspective of a man you know so very well. So Chuck, once again, welcome to New Hampshire. Thank you for being here. We look forward to hearing your comments.
Well, Bob, thank you. It's a special privilege to be in New Hampshire via this virtual communication, but a special privilege to have you here, and really a high honor to have you introduce me. I'm just fortunate, and I appreciate that you didn't tell the truth about me, but that 40 years of friendship, Bob, has been very special for me, and I might just add, in reciting some of the things that I've done in my life that I've had the privilege to participate in through and because of a lot of good people and a lot of help in my life. And you have been one of those. And we would not have turned the USO around without your involvement. And I really mean that. And I've said that over the years to many people. But just great to see you again, Bob. And also, I thank you for the introduction and the privilege that you'd participate in this. Also, good to be back with the New Hampshire World Affairs Council. You have one of the best, I think, most active councils in the country, and I've spoken to a lot of them all over the country, and I admire always what the World Affairs Councils do for their communities and education, and they're always involved in what's really important for citizenship, I think, in this country, and also to understand the world and understand America's role in the world. Well, before I get to questions and see what you want to talk about, whatever's on your mind, let me offer some opening thoughts about America's role in the world and our future and what may hold in the next 4 years. I say that with respect for the reality that we are living at as volatile, uncertain, and unpredictable time that I think we've seen since World War II. And that covers a lot the last 75 years because a lot has happened the last 75 years. But I think the core of the success of mankind, the great successes and leaps forward in the world in every discipline, has much been the result of American leadership. When we, along with our allies, built a world totally foreign from any other time in history after World War II, a liberal world order, and that was based on establishing institutions of what I call common interests, institutions like the United Nations, collective security like NATO, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, dozens of international institutions that were development of commerce, development of trade, development of education, development of exchange programs. The point being that each one of those institutions couldn't solve the problems of the world by themselves, but they could bring people together in common interests to assist in making a better world. More prosperity, more hope, more belief, more opportunities, more education for more people than ever before. And I think we review the record of the last 75 years with as many mistakes as we all in the world have made, including the United States. The world has been pretty successful. No World War III, no nuclear exchange. Those were two issues, big question marks that every World War II leader went to their graves worried about that there was going to be a nuclear exchange or another war. We've been successful in both of those areas in assuring that hasn't happened. We've been in wars, regional wars. We've still got wars. We've got terrorism, inequality, injustice. Yes, but when you really analyze it all, so much more freedom today with more people than ever before, more prosperity, more hope, more opportunities than ever before, more education than ever before. And I think we're at one of those times now in history that I refer to as a defining time. A defining time which will define much of how we go, where we go from here. It isn't written anywhere. It is not down in stone that we'll keep making progress. We, the United States, the world, will keep moving ahead, even with all the problems we've got that we're working on. That's not written anywhere, and that's not assured anywhere. We've been successful because I think, much because, as I've said, the United States has provided strong leadership. We've not dictated, we've not dominated, but we've used our power judiciously and benevolently with all the mistakes we've made. And I don't think any other power in the history of man has ever done that as well as we've done it with all of our imperfections. So we live now at this defining time in the world order. We see world institutions, these coalitions of common interests that we built after World War II, being challenged. Is it the right thing? Well, we haven't seen everybody benefit from that. We see that challenge in every Western democracy in the world. Authoritarianism rising its ugly head in Poland, in Hungary, in other Western democracies. Brexit, the UK splitting away from the European Union, the issues that are going on in Germany and other democracies in Europe, the neo-Nazi parties or some component of authoritarian parties, what's happening in this country, the polarization, the divide, the terrible division in this country. And we just saw it with an election that has resulted over the last few years in paralysis. Our Congress, our leaders. And then you add all on top of that, a poll that Gallup has been doing for the last 16 years, in a poll on the confidence and level and trust, the confidence level and trust of our 15 institutions in this country. Institutions like the military, like government, organized education, big business, the judiciary, the media, small business, organized religion, and only the military rates over 50% over the last few years. They come in around 75% almost every year. No other institution gets over 50% confidence and trust in those institutions, except small business this year. Everybody else is in the 20s, the teens, in Congress and politics is in the single digits. That's very dangerous for our society. These are the very, very institutions that represent the fabric of this nation. Everything we do, how we do it, and the people in our communities are all part of these institutions. And if a society loses confidence in those institutions, that society is in trouble. And I don't think that's just here in the United States. I think we're seeing that reflected all over the world, and especially that authoritarian dominance that's starting to rise in various parts of the world. Certainly, China is a challenge in and of itself, but that's not the real issue. I think there are bigger issues than just China, and I think they're more insular and they're more interior to us and other democracies. So the challenge we have, along with the immediate challenge of a pandemic health issue, which has essentially paralyzed our country, our economy, every facet of our lives, our education. There is not a string that you pull in our daily lives that's not affected by this virus. The consequences, which are manifested in what's happening in our economy, the world economy, everything, we're going to have to work through those. And the consequences are going to be there for a while. It's going to change how we do things. It's going to change businesses and how they structure, who and how many people they employ. That's all going to change because we've learned over the last few months, as civilization has throughout history, you adapt, you adjust to challenges, to the current challenges, and opportunities. And you use the time to find new opportunities within all of that. So when you add all of that up, again, I say it represents a pretty defining time in the world, a very defining time for the United States. And I think Joe Biden is going to be dealing with this as a priority item because Joe Biden spent 36 years in the Senate. He spent 36 years on the Foreign Relations Committee. I served on the Foreign Relations Committee my entire 12 years in the Senate. He spent 8 years as vice president. He understands the world probably as well as any president we've had. I don't know of any president who's had more depth in world affairs than Joe Biden. And I think he understands that this is a global community that we live in. This is a global economy. And you're not going to extricate yourself from that. You're not going to pull up the bridges. It ain't going to work. It won't work. We're all integrated. We're all 7 billion global citizens. Yes, we're citizens of sovereign nations first, but we're also global citizens. And the global issues, the global challenges facing us, whether it's climate change, regardless of what your position is on that, all you need to do is look at the weather patterns in this country over the last few years, in the world. Weather patterns still going on in this country. Pandemic health issues, this is a good reminder. COVID-19, what happens and what's going to continue to happen. This won't be the last. The economics of a global community and how that's interconnected. The diplomacy, what that represents, intelligence sharing, social media has changed everything. It's changed everything. That's not isolated to the countries, or that's just not us. That's everywhere. So I think what you'll see, and I think it's appropriate. I think we have no choice, but with a new administration, especially a Biden administration, a reach out into the world and probably reasserting a role for the United States that I think essentially we've pulled back from the last 4 years. Regardless of your position on that, whether you think that's right or wrong, the fact is when America is off balance, the world is off balance. When America doesn't lead, there's a vacuum. Now, again, you may like that, you may not like it. You might think we're carrying too much of a burden. I take the opposite position on that. I think of all the institutions that we lead and we support, and yes, we're heavier supporters than anybody else in almost everything we do, every international organization, because we are the biggest, the best, the wealthiest. So we have some obligation, but that is all redounded to our benefit as much or more than any other nation. Yes, everyone has been helped and everyone has been assisted by NATO, for example. But I don't know of a nation that has benefited more from NATO or any other organization than the United States. For example, as Secretary of Defense, I saw firsthand projection of power. The United States couldn't project that power around the world like no other country can. China can't. China will never be able to do that, except us. And the reason we have that ability is because of alliances, because of allies. They allow us in their countries to build bases, to have our armed forces, to have our ports all over the world. Yes, it's in their interest as well, but certainly it is in our interest. It's in the world interest. And I don't mean to say that as we're the world's policemen, that we have to keep the world secure, but we are the leader in the world in every respect. And there's no nation close to us in any way. China has got an economy that's strong. They're going to be here. You're not going to stop China. We got to be smarter. We've got to come at it sometimes in a different way. I think a point that Biden makes, and I've always believed this. I know Xi. I've met with him. I know the Chinese. I know about them. The Chinese respect strength. They respect directness, but they also respect wise leadership. They've got problems, huge problems, and they've got interior problems, insular problems that are more than just the Uyghurs in Western China and Hong Kong and Taiwan, but they've got other significant procedural process challenges as well, as every country has challenges. But the point is, and I think this is exactly the right approach, and Biden has talked about this, when dealing with China, for example, you're far better off when you have alliances, when you have allies with you. Just as we found out it is with Iran or North Korea or wherever the big challenges are. So the question is going to be, again, what is America's role in the world? And we'll see how that plays out the next 4 years. But in my opinion, I think we need to reassert our role in the world and not dominate, not dictate, but lead. And you do that, as we've done, I think, pretty successfully over the last 75 years, with cooperation with allies, working through institutions. They're many times frustrating, and sometimes we'd like to stop it, and we'd like to do it unilaterally. But for the long-term interest and long-term stability, wise, steady leadership coming from the United States that the world needs to see and the world needs to have confidence in. just like our citizens need to have confidence in our institutions. Because if those all go down, and we could see internationally a world where it's a free-for-all, every nation for themselves. We don't want that kind of a world. That brought on 2 world wars, and in the worst, most deadly half century in the history of man, World War I and World War II. We don't want to go back to that. And it'd be far deadlier this time because of the sophistication of nuclear weapons, the sophistication of weapons just generally, and the sophistication of technology. So we've got to be even more adept and wise in how we project our power, how we use our power, and how we lead the world. So those are some thoughts I have as we're going into a new administration, a new time. As I said, I think a very defining time. I would just end with this. I suspect we've had different and various kinds of defining times since World War II. A couple of the ones that I think have been the most defining times would be the implosion of the Soviet Union back in the late 80s and the early 90s. And under George H.W. Bush, who Bob Odell has worked for and worked with for many years, and I know Bob was a close friend of President and Mrs. Bush and his family. Under his leadership, and Jim Baker and Brent Scowcroft, they landed this wreckage, the Soviet Union, safely, and they made it work. And you got to remember, back in those days when all this happened, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety. Where's all this going? Where are those nuclear weapons going to end up? It's just the start of another dictatorship, a more militant dictatorship. A lot of questions. But because of Bush and Baker and Scowcroft and Colin Powell and others' leadership, this worked out pretty well for the world. I think the second most defining time that we've had during this 75-year period, after we adjusted to the implosion of the Soviet Union, was 9/11, when the United States was attacked by terrorists. We had never seen anything like this. We had never had this happen to us. It shocked us, it stunned us, it knocked us completely off balance. And I think in many ways we're still off balance. And I think we made some bad decisions over the last 20 years because of it. And so I think in many ways we're still recovering from that. And then you get 8 years later, we've got the worst economic recession catastrophe we've had since the Great Depression. And we're working our way back out of that. And we've done a pretty good job. So these defining times come in shorter time spans because the world in many ways is being compressed. It's a smaller world that we're all living in today in every way: transportation, technology, communication. It brings all 7 billion people closer together every day in every way. And demographers tell us that we're going to put probably 2 billion more people on the face of the earth, probably by 2050. That's stunning to think about 2 billion more people. And when you project out over the future for your grandchildren and your children, you know, what kind of world is that going to be if we're having the problems that we're having now and can't figure out some of these things? Do we think it's going to be easier when we put 2 billion more people on the face of the earth? When we've got clean water issues, we've got environmental issues, pandemic issues that are not going away unless we all get together and deal with them. So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I'm an optimist just generally, but I'm sure as hell a realist. I've seen too much in my life not to be a realist. But with all the capacity and capability this nation and this world possesses, never, ever in the history of man have we had so much capability and so much capacity as we do now to fix these problems, to address these problems if we are wise enough and smart enough to do it and do it the right way. So with that, whatever you want to talk about, I'll talk about. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. We really appreciate your insights, and particularly appreciate that you ended on a positive note there. Not a lot of what we talk about these days, particularly in 2020, is positive. So good job on ending on a high note. So we've got a lot of questions coming in. We'd love for people to continue to send in their questions, but why don't we start off with this one? We've gotten a couple similar questions as this one. So what kind of pushback can we expect from the rest of the world as we try to reestablish our leadership roles in international institutions?
Well, I think that most of the world is going to welcome the United States coming back into that role and verifying that role. It will be done, I'm sure, because of Biden, because I know him. Tony Blinken, I've known for 20 years, worked with Tony, been all over the world with Blinken. Jake Sullivan, I know all those people. I know how they think. I know how they operate. I know what kind of people they are. That's first. I know their character. I know their integrity. That's where you start. And if you don't have that in leaders, it's going to end badly. I don't care how damn smart anybody is. It doesn't matter. It ends badly. Character and integrity are prerequisites for everything. And so I'm very hopeful about this. And I think I talk to a lot of ambassadors, former prime ministers, foreign ministers, defense ministers, and I've talked to a lot of them since the election. They're very enthusiastic, very enthusiastic. First, you've got a president who understands them, who spent 44 years of his life. He knows every existing leader in the world today. He knows Xi, knows Putin. They know him. They know he respects the business of foreign policy and how important it is. So that gives them, I think, hope and enthusiastic about what we're going to be doing. We'll have differences. Every nation has differences. Every nation responds in its own self-interest. We sure as hell do. That's okay. But as long as there's some trust, as long as there's some common interest, as long as you can make deals that are on both sides, so both sides benefit, I think most of the world's going to welcome that. And just a steady influence of some leadership in the world. And I think, quite frankly, China will welcome it. This conversation I hear occasionally, I see in newspapers, oh, China will welcome it because Biden will be easier to deal with. No, not really. I've been with Biden and Xi when the three of us have been together in meetings, and Biden's pretty direct. He's pretty clear, and no, there won't be any easy pickings with the Biden administration for China, but Biden will come at it differently. He won't try to sanction everything and tariff everybody, and every time there's a hiccup somewhere, we'll put a new sanction on them. That's insanity. That doesn't work. That hurts us usually more than it hurts anybody else. That's no way to conduct foreign policy or world affairs. And I think the sophistication of the United States and what we have represented to the world is going to be welcome back. And I don't know that, but that's my sense.
Sure. Well, speaking of Jake Sullivan, one of the negotiators of the JCPOA and current New Hampshire resident for the time being. So we have a question here about, do you think Iran will re-enter the JCPOA along with the US, or do the hardliners have too much control to say that this didn't work the first time around?
Yeah. Well, it did work the first time around. It's the United States that pulled out of it. And all of the joint signatories to it, including our three strongest allies, Germany, France, and the UK, along with China and Russia, all kept adhering to the principles of it. So it wasn't a matter of it didn't work. It was working very well, matter of fact. And I think Biden will move rather quickly to try to resurrect that. It will have to be probably differently structured. because we're 5 years down the road. We're the ones that pulled out, but I think you'll see it very similar. I think it will get to the heart of what was accomplished in 2015, and I helped negotiate that when I was Secretary of Defense. It really completely neutralized Iran's ability to take the nuclear piece of its research and of its energy and weaponize it. We neutralized that. And we did it for up to a 13, 15 year point. It gave us our inspectors on the ground in Iran, anytime, anywhere. It totally dominated the end of their centrifuge spinning so that they couldn't process plutonium. All their plutonium was sent out of Iran. Did Iran get something out of it? And it comes to the point on the question about the hardliners. Yeah, they got something out of it. But we wouldn't have had any deal without Iran's got to get something out of it. That's the art of a good deal. Is what they're getting out of it worth it to us? And what it was sanctions coming off, allowing Iran to enter the global market and the global economy. I don't think that's all bad for us. I don't think that's all bad for long-term peace. And so they got an economic boost. And the other thing that happened with that is the moderates had a dominant voice now in Iran, because there are moderates in Iran. You've got 3 generations since 1979 that have come along in Iran. They're sick and tired of the Ayatollah. They're sick and tired of the dominance of that dictatorial Islamic government. The young people, they want changes. The middle class, they want changes. They want prosperity. They want opportunities. So there is a significant moderate group there. And when we pulled out, that just reversed the process and gave the hardliners more strength. The hardliners said, we told you, you can't trust the United States. They're liars. They're going to cheat all the time. And so the hardliners go back in control. So I know the Iranians have said, if we want to re-engage in that deal, we're going to have to do these things and so on. That's negotiating tactics. That's all upfront stuff. Once we get into it, we'll get into it. But I'm not worried about that. But I think Biden will move on it. Our allies want us to move on it. I think, Russia and Putin will continue to try to make it difficult for us, but they sure as hell want this thing to work too. They don't want a nuclear Iran that's kind of wild, not knowing what's going to happen, unpredictable. It's not in their interest either. I mean, China's looking at their ambitions globally with that economy, and they need some stability. Yes, they're going to make it hard for us where they can and so on, but they're going to need stability. The Russians are economically on their knees, and it's not going to get better for them because of oil and gas. It's all they have, and the demand for oil and gas, not in the short term, but for the long term, as clean energy comes on the scene and more movement toward countries in that area. That's something that you would not want to be buying as a future stock, Russia's future. So they're going to need some stability. They're going to need some help in a development of a global economy. So this is clearly in the interest of everybody.
Yeah. And do you think the recent assassination of the top nuclear scientist in Iran will hamper these negotiations moving forward? I know that a lot of the reporting out there is saying that this was the Iranians believe it was Israel, but of course the global view is that Israel doesn't do anything without the consent of the U.S. So does this going to further challenge the Biden administration and getting back into that agreement?
Well, I think it's a complication that the Biden administration didn't need. I think I don't know. I don't know who was responsible for it. I don't know if we had knowledge of it or winked and nodded if it was Israel. But it's a tactic that Netanyahu has used. And the Israelis, I mean, there's no secret that Netanyahu and Biden aren't on the closest of terms. Sure as hell, the Biden administration is not going to be the same place where the Trump administration was with the Netanyahu people and Netanyahu himself. So Netanyahu, I think, again, I'm not accusing Israel of this because I don't know, but I'm sure he wasn't disappointed in that this is an added complication for the Biden administration working with Iran. And the Israelis announced it, that Netanyahu and the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince, MBS, had a meeting that the Saudis continued to deny that the meeting ever took place after the Israelis said, no, it did take place. In that meeting, according to intelligence sources that we now are public, was about trying to get MBS to agree on an attack on Iran. Well, that wouldn't be exactly amenable and helpful for a Biden administration just coming into office, have to deal with the consequences of that and the results of that if that happens. So that's my view of it.
Sure. So that leads perfectly into Allison's question. New executive director of the World Affairs Council over in Maine, our sister partner over there. Post-Abraham Accords, what are the possibilities and implications of an overt security alliance between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE?
Well, the UAE, as you already know, in the Abraham Accord was the main partner with Israel. I know they have tried to get Saudi Arabia into that deal initially, and they'll continue. I don't know. I think Saudi Arabia's got some problems, and I think they're pretty deep. And I think it revolves around MBS, the young, arrogant, inexperienced crown prince who's gotten Saudi Arabia, driven them into a ditch in a lot of ways. And you'll see the Biden administration take a whole different approach to Saudi Arabia than the Trump administration did. And it's not going to be particularly favorable for MBS. I know through sources that the king is now reevaluating leadership there. The king knows Biden very well. And I know the king. He's wise. He's not in good health. But there's some pretty significant internal dynamics going on in Saudi Arabia right now about how they're going to deal with the Biden administration in the future. Biden has already said human rights are going to be a big factor in his administration in the Middle East. Well, Saudi Arabia's human rights record is not particularly good, and especially as he's continuing to do what he's doing, most recently putting a couple of the women that he's had held up in jail in the terrorist courts, which is nuts. The assassination of Khashoggi, so many things. The Yemeni war that we've continued to support, that slaughtered thousands and thousands of civilians. Biden's going to have a whole different approach to that. And so I don't know if that leads Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords or not. They've got pressures inside. They're seeing that their friend, the UAE, is moving in a different direction than them in a lot of ways. So I don't know. I don't know how that goes. It'll depend, I think, on if they have some new leadership in Saudi Arabia. Depends on what their relationship is as they develop a relationship with the Biden administration. I don't think the Saudi Arabia would take that action without some consultation with the United States. and I suspect that we would be supportive of them joining that. I saw today, which many of you did, that Sudan was the third Islamic country to join, is now looking like it may withdraw because of their own internal issues. So, how firm that accord is going to be to hold on, and we all know that deal was just a kind of putting a bow on it in the light of what was going on financially between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain. They've been doing business for years under the table, and everybody knew it. And also there was a defense issue involved, the F-35s. And as you know, we have not sold our most sophisticated weapons, our aircraft, or any of the platforms to any Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia. And the UAE wants our new aircraft, the F-35. And so I don't know the specifics of that, but I know there was a lot of quiet dealings of Netanyahu and Israel trying to help UAE get that done in the United States if they would join the Abraham Accords.
All right, so we're doing a little bit of what ifs, but if you were Secretary of State, who would you visit first?
I would probably visit NATO and shore up that relationship. Soon thereafter, you would have to go to Asia and shore up that South Korean-Japanese relationship. The South Korean U.S. relationship has been rather testy the last 4 years. My former senior military advisor, General Abrams, is the NATO combined commander in South Korea, and I talked to him a lot. We've got pretty raggedy relationship with South Korea right now. It's gotten worse the last 4 years. But I think Asia has got to be right behind the European shoring up with that NATO alliance, because the NATO alliance, even though it's Atlantic centric, the Atlantic Ocean centric, it still goes beyond that. I mean, we have NATO partners with us in Afghanistan, not any really, hardly in Iraq. Certainly when we first got there, we've got a few hundred troops there now, but that's really probably the bulwark, the key for us. Not that the Japanese and South Korean relationship is not important; it's damn important. So I would move on Asia soon after I was in Europe.
Great. So another question we have, some would say the success of Trump has been in his avoidance of getting into new wars and trying to remove us from ongoing ones. Would you agree with this? And how would you see this issue changing or not under a Biden administration?
Well, the premise of a successful or what's been successful in Trump's administration, I don't agree with. I don't think anything's been successful. I don't see it. Not getting us into any new wars. I don't know what new wars were on the horizon the last 4 years to get us into. We're in Syria, we're in Afghanistan, we're in Iraq. Now he says he's pulling troops out of Afghanistan. I'm all for pulling troops out of those places, but you got to do it smartly. I think it's been a fiasco in Afghanistan with the whole peace process. We repeated in that process exactly what we did in South Vietnam. We sat down and negotiated with the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. We kept the South Vietnamese government out of it. And then we made the deal with the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese and came back and told the South Vietnamese government, this is what you're going to live with. Exact same thing we did with Afghanistan. We kept the Afghan government, Ghani's government, out of it. And we went and negotiated with the Taliban and said, this is what you're going to live with. and you're gonna release 5,000 of the worst prisoners you've got because that's the deal we made. But you're in charge of your government. That's going to end crazy. I mean, the Taliban hasn't come close to adhering to the agreements and the specifics of those agreements, and yet Trump is pulling our troops out, or at least half of our troops out, without no reciprocal action. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So I don't agree with the premise that he had any success anywhere. And what's really the problem with Trump's foreign policy, it wasn't at all looking ahead. You know, I've been a great advocate of a simple question in life, a simple question in business, simple question in relationships, in anything. Then what happens? Then what happens? We didn't ask that question in Afghanistan. We didn't ask it in Iraq before we invaded, thinking our military power was going to change everything. And I was in the Senate at the time. It was on the Foreign Relations Committee, Intelligence Committee, and all the hearings we had with all the secretaries that come up, there was no conversation about nation building. I mean, we spent trillions of dollars on nation building. We've been in Afghanistan almost 20 years, in Iraq almost 18 years. We're still supporting those countries. What's the exit strategy? Colin Powell's most basic question, that you don't introduce your troops ever, obviously, unless you're attacked like Pearl Harbor in World War II. But that was even different from New York, the Pentagon, and Washington than 9/11. Totally different, because it wasn't a nation state. What's the exit strategy? How are you going to leave? You got any idea? We didn't have any idea. And so what I'm saying is that as Trump conducted foreign policy, and I think I'm generous in saying he had any foreign policy other than sanctions and other than love letters with Kim in North Korea and everybody loves me, and sanctioning and tariffing our allies and going before the United Nations every year annually and saying, let me tell you again, it's America first. It's America first. I'm sorry about all you freeloaders. You've lived off the United States from NATO. You've lived all these institutions we've supported. He pulls us out of the World Health Organization, pulls us out of TPP, hurts our trade, opens the door to China, pulls us out of the Paris Environmental Accords. I mean, then what happens? Well, when you ask those questions about his actions that he's taken in 4 years, I don't think you get an answer or a very articulate or intelligent answer. How does this enhance America? To pull us out of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. If there was anything that was as big a surprise bonus to China as us doing that, I don't know what it was. And China goes to those other 11 countries, said, you can't trust the United States, but we can make a deal. Well, when you can't trust the United States, and essentially what we've told people, America first, the last 4 years, where do you think people are going to go? They don't have a lot of options. If they feel isolated, they feel they don't have confidence and trust in us, our word, and can't support us. He pulls troops out of Germany. I mean, why? And for what reason? If we want to have a power projection, and those troops were active duty, airborne, they were like 48-hour troops that you could move those troops anywhere in the world in 48 hours without having to come from the United States. The readiness factor was stunning. I mean, to undercut readiness by doing that. So any action he's taken, I don't in any way see how that's a success for our foreign policy.
So you bring up China, and the Chinese Navy is now larger than the U.S. Navy, and China is the dominant power in Africa. They are active in peacekeeping. Can the U.S. ever catch up? And this comes from WACNH member Richard Lobin, who's also a professor down at the U.S. Naval War College.
Well, I think both of those questions are good ones, specific. Um, China, first of all, is not a global power. As I said earlier, it doesn't project power. It's just when they talk about more ships, they don't have more blue water ships than we do. And we need more ships. And every Secretary of Defense the last 20 years has said that, every Secretary of the Navy. We say we're going to do it, and we don't do it. But it's the quality of the ships too. It's the technology that is on those ships, and technology is everything, as we know. The Chinese have been fortunate for them because all of the money that they've put into their defense budget, which is not even close to ours, but it's for new technology. It's not going back and having to deal with and maintenance cost ships that we've been sailing for 40 years, 50 years, that we should have mothballed a long time ago, or airplanes, B-52s from the 1950s, that we've got to pull maintenance on. And so that drains away from money that we could be putting in new technology, F-35s, new ships, new submarine class, most advanced technology. So it takes away from what we can do to match the Chinese on technology. We're still ahead of them on technology. And in any way you apply a comparison. And they don't have the projection of power. But because technology is now so dominating everything, the power of their missiles, their capability, China's capability, is very significant. Their space capability, they just went to the moon and landed something on the moon to pick up rocks and so on. So they're going to continue to advance as we have to also. So I think also I'll give you an example. In 2014, I spent a week in China, and I was the first one that they showed their aircraft carrier to. Well, the aircraft carrier they had, as many of you know, and our questionnaire knows this, was a retrofitted old Soviet carrier that had been constructed in the Ukraine. It still had the slope front end on the noses. The nose end, the planes go up as they go up off the deck, and they were very proud of it. It was the first one, and so I was the first American that they showed it to. So they gave me a tour. Now they didn't take me to the engine room or any intelligence or the areas that are most important for me to see. They didn't show me those, but they had these very smart young captains that were taking me around, and all of them spoke impeccable English, and all of them had been educated at Oxford or most of them in London somewhere or the UK, and smart young people. And very interesting, they had women officers stationed at every point along the way to remind me how sophisticated their Navy was and how integrated their Navy was and how women play such an important role in command and leadership and so on. But as these young captains are taking me through the carrier, the big admirals are kind of watching over all this. These young captains, when they were alone with me, they're laughing. They're making fun of the ship. And they're saying, I know it's not as good as yours. You have much better ships. This is a terrible ship. I mean, they're saying these things to me. And I got to go out to their enlisted academies, the Chinese and so on. I mean, yes, they've got a significant Army, Armed Forces, Navy, Air Force. But my point in telling you this story is because it's still people. I don't care how damn good your weapons are. If you don't have the people and the leadership and all that goes into that, you're not that your weapons are useless, but they can't never be and will never be as effective without leadership and the right kind of people. And I think the Chinese have got a big problem there, not just in their military, but everything. They've got internal problems. So yes, China is a threat. Yes, China is an issue. It's going to continue to be an issue. We're going to have to deal with that, but we just have to be smarter. We're smarter. We're better. We've got better everything, and we'll continue to have that if we do the right things.
Okay, I want to go back to your point about still flying B-52s and having ships from the 40 or 50 years ago. So why, notwithstanding pork barrel lobbying, etc., do we have the military spending escalation and expansion? We continue to dwarf the military budgets and specialized weapons of other developed nations.
So the question is, why do we have the budget?
Why is it still being asked to expand when we are so far ahead of other countries in terms of specialized weapons?
Well, to start with, more than half of the military budget, our military budget, goes to personnel. And you look at the federal budget, you look at where more than half of our federal budget, the entire federal budget, goes to obligated funds and programs already. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt, retirement, military, not military, but civilian retirement. Those are obligated funds. And so you've got less than half of your entire budget that the Congress and the president has control over to make decisions. Same principle applies in the Pentagon. It's personnel that really eats that up. And then you take then what's available. You still have to stay ahead of the Chinese. I mean, the Russians are advancing as well, but they're not near the threat that the Chinese are. The Russians are a problem and are going to continue to be a problem because they find niches to go after us. They'll find the Ukraines and the Crimeas and the Middle East. That's the way they do it, the niches. They're dangerous. Yes, they've got good stuff, but it's a whole different ballgame than China. China is the big issue, the big threat. And so you've got to stay ahead in technology of China. Plus, you've got all the old platforms that I just referenced, and we can't get rid of those. I remember New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte in hearings. We were trying to get rid of the A-10 Warthog, I think, because the Air Force said we don't need it. It's 40 years old. It was a good aircraft when it in its day, but we got so much better. We should be parking it. And Kelly Ayotte made a big deal. No, we're not going to get rid of it because my husband flew them and said they're a great plane. And no, so she was absolutely opposed to it. Well, also that's jobs too. So when you take the old planes and the old ships into ports, into wherever it's Maine or Louisiana or Mississippi, boy, those are jobs for people. I'm not going to give up thousands of jobs in my district, in my state, because you need new weapons. I can't do that. Oh, Mr. Secretary, no. Well, that A-10 Warthog was still a great plane, although it's completely antiquated and it can't do near as much as what the new planes can do. No, we still need that plane. So, and I'd go before the Senate committee and I'd say, guys, you raised the hell with us that you don't think we're investing in the right things, and you're giving us. And by the way, when I was Secretary of Defense, we didn't have more money. I mean, 5 days after I took over Secretary of Defense, sequestration hit. And I'll never forget that morning, the comptroller came in and, Mr. Secretary, you're going to have a bad day today. I said, really? Good. Give me the good news here. He said, sequestration just hit. Do you know what that means for us? We were already taking a $50 billion cut each year because of the budget deal that President Obama and the Congress had made in 2011. Because we were going to take $500 billion over 10 years from the defense budget. So we were going to take 50 billion a year. So we were already down 50 billion. He said, what it means is you're going to have to find another 50 billion in cuts in the next 11 months. That's going to apply the next 11 months. That wasn't planned for, wasn't budgeted. So when I was there, no, we were getting cut. We didn't have a lot more money. Now Trump and the Republican Congress put a lot more money in the Defense Department budget. I suspect that's going to be looked at with a little more discipline now with the Biden administration. I don't know that, but some of the, as I've just noted, some of the reasons why the Defense Department requires the kind of budget it does, if the United States and the citizens of this country, as represented by their members of Congress, still want the United States to do the same things in the world that we're doing. And for me, I would say, yes, we do, because you walk back that, if you take those responsibilities out of our hands, the vacuum will be filled. The vacuum will be filled. If it's not filled by China and Russia, it'll be filled by terrorists, or it'll be filled by somebody. And you will have one hell of a dangerous world.
All right, so I want to get to two more questions before we wrap up here. First being, questioner imagines that the DoD and armed forces are as polarized as the rest of the country. How did you observe that during your tenure as secretary, and what can be done to address that issue?
Well, I don't think the armed services were polarized, not at all. I didn't see that. The chiefs of each service worked very well together. I mean, that was something that on the first day I was there, I didn't call them into my office. That's not the way I did things. I would go to their office and sit down with them in their office, and then I'd go to the tank, where the tank is where the chiefs and the chairman and the vice chairman meet. It's kind of sacrosanct territory. They don't let anybody in there. But I said on the first day, we're going to be in this together. And then I had to make that appeal again when we took another $50 billion cut, because each of the services were going to have to give. They were going to have to give back money that they already thought they had, and they were going to have to give it back. And I said, I will not tolerate any of you slipping around outside what we as the team are going to figure out, going up to members of Congress, your favorite members of the Senate and the House who like you, and say, the Marines are getting more, or the Army is getting more, the poor Air Force is not getting up, or whichever service it is. We're not going to do that. We're going to be in this together. We're going in together. We're coming out together. And they did it too. They did a great job. I was so proud of them. We didn't have any conflict within the services. We negotiated it out. Everybody compromised. So I never saw any kind of polarization inside. The military people, the uniformed military people, are amazing people. They are as selfless a group of people as I've ever known in my life. I saw it when I was in Vietnam, when I was only in the Army a couple of years. But to see it firsthand, as I saw in the Senate when I would go out around the world, but to lead that group, to see it firsthand, and so they make it work. And I think the 1986 law that was passed, the Goldwater-Nichols, which integrated the services. So you have, for example, STRATCOM out in my state, out in Omaha. It's a Strategic Air Command, the nuclear command. You have Marine generals will be in charge of that. We'll have an Army general in there. You'll have an Air Force general, of course. You'll have a Navy admiral. All the commands circulate, and that's tremendous. That integrates the services, the leadership, and the understanding of all the men and women, their jobs, their responsibilities. And I think that law in 1986 was probably the most important thing that's been done for our national security and national defense since the 1947 National Security Act, which set up the National Security Advisor and so on. So I just never saw any polarization in the Congress, because the military does not operate that way. They can't, and they know it.
All right, I've been holding on to this question because I think this is a great one to end on. Are there any potential under-discussed flashpoints, conflicts bubbling up right now in the world that could grow into an international issue the way Syria did?
Well, I think you take that region, the Middle East, that's the most dangerous part of the world, and you go further south there into that region in Asia. You move over toward Iran, China, Pakistan, India. Russia's not too far from there. All except Iran are nuclear powers. Flashpoints are all along that area. And anything can happen anytime in those areas. The rest of the world, I don't think is near as susceptible to something occurring quickly or maybe even unpredictably as that area of the world, the Middle East, and then further as you move further into Asia. That's the area that we're going to be continuing to look at and watch for a long time. I mean, Southeast Asia, China, yes, China's got the Taiwan issue. Hong Kong is explosive, is a problem. But the Chinese are very, very smart. They don't do anything unless it's well thought out. They're good at taking advantage, but they're very wise about how they do things. I mean, they'll kill you by inching on you. The South China Sea, East China Sea issue is volatile. It was when I was there. I was the first one to confront Xi personally on South China Sea and East China Sea. I said, we're not going to allow that to happen. That's an international waterway. Freedom of the seas is critically important. And we all need that. We are a Pacific power. We've always been a Pacific power in the United States. And you need to know that. And what you're doing there is illegal. It's wrong. We know what you're doing there, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, he didn't like that. He wasn't real happy with those conversations I had with him. But that's the way you got to deal with them. And so, China is always a possibility. North Korea, of course, with that wacky kid. I mean, God knows what he does. And there's some internal issues that we know enough about. There's maybe some instability there. Not sure what his sister is doing or how much power she has, but it seems to be that's growing. It's the most insular country in the world. We don't have good intelligence. Even the Chinese are concerned about the North Koreans. This kid could do something really wacky. We have 7 treaty obligations in the world, and 2 of them are right there. Japan and South Korea. We're obligated to come to their defense. That's a serious place. But I think the most ignitable and volatile and possibly nitroglycerin way to handle something is still the Middle East and that area where those nuclear powers are, and into Asia, into that area of Asia.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. We really appreciate you giving us the time to come and speak about these very important issues and giving us some insider information into what to expect as the transition to the Biden administration comes and the next 4 years. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Nice to be with all of you, and thank you. And again, thank you all for what you do. I mean, I just think it's so damn important that you continue to do what you're doing. These World Affairs Councils in so many areas are the only option and outlet people have to know what's going on in the world. You do a great service to the world. And to my dear friend, Bob Odell, you You look great, Bob. Thank you for introducing me. And I was talking to Lilibet tonight, and she was reminiscing a little bit on some of the times that we were together in Paris and other places that you raised money for the USO and made things happen when the Europeans never ever raised money or donated money like the United States does. But you changed all that. So the USO is indebted to you, sir. Thank you. Happy holidays to everybody.
All right. Well, thank you very much to everyone for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. We hope that you enjoyed the presentation and the Q&A. We tried to get as many questions in as we could, and thank you to the Secretary for going over time a little bit. Just as a quick reminder for our final event of the year, next week we will be hosting the final Global Tipping Points program on December 8th, talking about national security and climate change with Brigadier General Cheney, with Todd Sternum from the Brookings Institution, and we just tonight received confirmation that Senator Shaheen will be joining us for this discussion. So we're really excited about that. We hope that you will join us for that program as well. So thank you again to all of our wonderful supporters, to CCA Global Partners, to McLean Middleton and Southern New Hampshire University, as well as all of you for joining us tonight. We hope you have a wonderful evening, a very happy holiday season, and we look forward to a time when we can get back to our in-person programming in a safe manner. Have a wonderful evening and good night.